Hello, this is James from Ludic Language Pedagogy, and today I'm going to be talking about what digital game-based language learning is. So, digital game-based language learning often appears within call literature, hence the subtitle DGBLL. Not just GBLL, DGBLL appears a lot. And simply put, GBLL is concerned with the use of games for language learning. You find research concerned with the effective benefits of gameplay, so how it affects students' learning experiences and their motivation. L2 development, so how can the language be developed through gameplay. Communicative and interactional affordances of gameplay. Extramural, informal, connected, student-driven, autonomous learning, so how do students use games in the wild to learn a language. And finally, there are studies which look at the kinds of games or the types of games and how game design may affect learning and language development. What GBLL isn't is it's not a unified approach to or a theory of SLA. Whereas you see the term TBLT, GBLL is not equivalent to that level of pedagogical rigor, or at least a defined approach with specific things that we do as part of DGBLL. What I'm trying to say is that GBLL can be practiced from many different approaches. It can be done from an interactionist approach or a cognitive approach, a social approach, and sometimes taking in the idea of the literacy turn and how games can be used as an ecology. Okay, so we'll look into these different kinds of approaches with the use of games later on. So just think that one cannot do GBLL as one may be able to do TBLT. I can make my class a TBLT class, but GBLL must be based on a prior pedagogical framework, essentially. GBLL doesn't necessarily have to be digital. The fact that it appears mostly in call is because digital games are used a lot, which is an issue which we'll come to later. So GBLL is not necessarily digital games. The application of so GBLL is not the application of game mechanics to a course or curriculum. This is known as gamification, which we will cover in the next video. So what are some concrete examples of GBLL research? Okay, let's have a look. First, we have this study from Peterson in 2012. He used a COTS game, which stands for commercial over-the-shelf game. So a mass-marketed, for-profit, developed by a game development team and put out for regular use. It's not specifically designed for language learning. The game that they used was called Wonderland, and it is an MMORPG, which we looked at in the previous video, which means a massively multiplayer online RPG. And you can see here that we have many different characters with different levels, different things to do. And yeah, this is the game world that Peterson used. It's now actually defunct. It doesn't exist anymore. It's gone out of they're just not managing the servers anymore. They closed it down. So let's have a look at the study. In Peterson's study, the method was that he used 4 Japanese university students, and he introduced the game to them, showed them how chat works, what the wiki is, and where FAQ pages exist on the internet, and he let students play the game. Results of them playing the game, well, Peterson looked at chat logs, and the chat logs revealed that students greeted each other using polite and informal language. So they used different registers, it's a pragmatics point, and they used small talk and humour with other players of the game. Players made friends with others, creating a shared communicative context for interaction. Students relished the opportunity to engage in authentic language use online. So effectively, this game seemed to provide an interesting experience for students to speak with native speakers online. Critique of this in terms of GBLL, or what we're going to be coming to in LLP in a later video, is that there was no teaching pre, during, or post gameplay. The students were merely introduced to the game and told to play it. So with teaching, could this study have been better, is a critique here. It also assumes that students have pre-existing knowledge of the L2 if there's no teaching. It's basically, here's a game, go and play it in English and let us know how it goes. So it assumes that there's pre-existing knowledge. There's no need to teach them any language outside of the game, or at least that's how I read it. Richardson, this is from 2016, and this study was using an AR game, which is augmented reality. And that was using the app Aurasma. And you can see here on the side, there's a photo from the paper, and the author created various puzzles in physical locations that the students would have to go out of the classroom into the public and solve the puzzles to figure out how to clear the mystery, how to solve the mystery. In this study, there were 78 advanced level students. So again, there's an assumption that they may not need base level, foundation level language skills to be taught to them. Richardson introduced the system, and they played during one 90-minute class. After playing, students wrote they wrote a sentence as a reaction to having played the game. So they gave their opinion on what they thought, what their opinion was. They gave their opinion on gameplay, and that's what was collected. Results was that showed that engagement was high with this game. The choice of tasks was considered positive. So, for example, students didn't do every single one of these tasks. They could choose which tasks they did outside of the classroom. One of the comments from the students was that spontaneous language use was considered a strong point of the system, meaning that the students felt that that the system promoted them to use the L2, in this case English, outside of the classroom in their everyday locale, which was a little bit awkward at first, but was a good motivator to push them to use the L2 outside of the classroom. Again, spontaneous language use was considered a strong point of the system. So a critique of this study perhaps would be that the focus of the paper is on the design of the game mostly, rather than on its pedagogical implementation. That is, what is collected here is student perceptions of the system in order to create a better system next time. And the post-play activities could be incorporated. I think that post-play activities could be incorporated to improve L2 knowledge. Instead of just playing the game once and leaving it, it could be used for students to make their own game, or to explore history of the locale, or something like this. So again, there's a lack of teaching, I feel, in this paper. Next, we have Scholz and Schulze, 2017, Extramural MMO play. In this paper, learners played World of Warcraft after school, and the paper looked for near transfer of skills in class. So looking at this, we can say that can the game language be transferred to a non-game environment? I think this is a very strong point of this paper, and which is why it stays in my mind, is that for near transfer, they defined it as the ability to transfer to a similar context or topic. The paper essentially asked students to play World of Warcraft outside of school, come back into class, and discuss their play session with peers in the classroom. So it linked outside of school with in-school activities. So the game was considered a language learning ecology rather than just a content providing machine. Critiques, again, there's no concrete tasks other than talk about the game. No support materials to help learners play the game outside of class, no direction for playing the game. And finally, only focused on lexical items learned from the game. So there was a small part of the study was to see what vocabulary students used in the classroom based on their play. Next, I think this is the final one. Yes, this is the final paper, and it's from Sundqvist, and it was published in 2019. This paper explored the question, to what extent is there a relation between the time spent playing COTS, commercial games, and L2 English vocabulary test measures, test scores. I should write here, it should be test scores, sorry. So, in this study, there were 1,069 Swedish middle schoolers ages 15 to 16, and they completed 2 vocabulary tests, a productive and receptive test. They also completed a questionnaire to ask them how often they play games outside of the classroom. And based on the results showed that there was a significant correlation between time spent playing games outside of class and the scores on both tests. So here you can see that non-gamers, low frequent gamers, moderate gamers, frequent gamers, they were classified. Students were classified into one of these 4 categories, and the productive vocabulary test and the receptive vocabulary test, the mean score and the standard deviations here. So you can see that for basically the non-gamers mean score versus the frequent gamers mean score, there was a relationship between their score and how often they played games. Critique of this study would be that there was actually no data gathered on whether these 1,069 students actually played the games in English or their native language. So is it just gameplay that pushes them to a higher intelligence or a more frequent, what would I say? More familiarity with English words, or was it actually because they played English games? There's nothing conclusive about this paper, as far as I can tell anyway. Another thing, again, this is merely looking, again I say merely as a language teacher, this is looking at extramural gameplay and how that might affect language ability. That is the end of the GBLL section. In the next section I will be talking about gamification before we look at the issues with GBLL and gamification and how these can or could be, maybe, should be augmented in what we're calling the Ludic language pedagogy approach. So next we're going to look at gamification.